Hey guys, Cody Holt here, candidate for State Senate in the 33rd District. Just wanted to spend a little time here to start to go over some of the special interest group or the state's largest unions and some of the questionnaires that they sent me. This is important stuff because right now, even in this race, we have my opponent Danielle Penman, who's accepting money from organized labor, and Jessica Brueggemans, who is being supported by the Senate Republican organization and possibly even Don DeWitt. Both of those organizations supported putting the workers' rights amendment onto the ballot, which took away really kind of the ability to do pension reform in this state. It could end up costing taxpayers long term. It might actually cost people their retirement. So I think it's interesting that when you have groups kind of like these groups here that send you questionnaires, they should be answered publicly. With that being said, I think I want to start with AFSCME first. It's been unopened. The reason I want to start with AFSCME, I used to be forced to be a member of AFSCME back when I worked in the county. And then on day one, as soon as the Janice v. AFSCME decision came down from the Supreme Court, which gave workers, public sector workers, the right to opt out of their union, I opted out on day one. And I became one of the first people in this state to leave their union. It's something I'm proud of. I was not happy to be supporting speech and political activities that I did not agree with as a member. And over the course of the years, I helped other people leave the union too. So AFSCME might not like the answers I'm about to give, but I think these are important answers that you're owed, and I call on both Jessica and Danielle to publicly say where they're at on these issues. So let's open it on up here and see what AFSCME wants to ask. Okay. So you get kind of a run-of-the-mill AFSCME letter, kind of their sales pitch. We have 100,000 active and retired service members. We got a questionnaire for you. And on page 1, you have your basics. Just kind of who I am. I'm going to spare those for you guys because all this is publicly available stuff anyways. And let's see, 7-19. They have 22 questions. I could go ahead and kind of read some of them, but some of them are long-winded questions, actually. This is kind of impressive. Let's see how many talking points can fit into one question. Workers' rights and state-funded programs. Too many private entities that receive significant state funding actively oppose the efforts of their employees to form a union in order to have a voice on the job. Such opposition creates conflict in the workplace and often jeopardizes the delivery and quality of the services the state is paying. Would you support legislation that prevent the disruption of state services provided through grantees, vendors, contractors by protecting the rights of workers to form free of employer interference? Well, so actually how I'm going to answer these questions, just for editing's sake, I'm going to pose the question and then just answer it. So to answer this question, really you got to remember who the employer is here in this state. And the employer of state workers are taxpayers. And in neighboring states, we have states like Wisconsin that don't allow teachers to strike, which I think is a good thing. I think it keeps children in the classroom and it doesn't create an undue burden on parents. I support the rights of taxpayers over special interest groups. And that's how I'm going to end that question. Do you support limiting corporate tax breaks that drain state revenue and benefit only a handful of large, profitable businesses? Well, actually, I agree with not having laws that really interfere too much in the economy. And I don't want the economy interfering too much in government affairs. So I think that's how I'm going to approach any legislation that comes forward, depending on where it comes from. I don't support a graduated income tax structure. I support what's called a fair tax, and not the same. And the important distinction is that's not the same fair tax that Governor Pritzker was supporting, which is a hijacking of the term. It's an equal tax, income tax across the playing field for anybody. And I think that's important. And I think it's a great way to have growth. And I think it's a way to bring down the tax burden on people and start to unleash the economy of Illinois. Do you support revenue-raising measures to offset loss of federal funds for state programs and services? It's a fancy way of saying, do I support tax increases? No. I've never voted for a tax increase as a local U46 school board member. I've never advocated for increasing taxes, and I sure as heck won't start in the state Senate. Would you support efforts to strengthen our state's public universities by seeking to improve state funding levels? Well, see, this is interesting because the basis of the question is funding equals better results. And that's not always the case. In U46, right now, we have about a $900 million budget. And you have 50% of kids who go on to community college at Elgin Community College that need to take remedial courses. So increase in funding does not equal better results. And I think we need to start to look at 21st century ways to modernize and improve education and start to kind of get away from this idea that more tax dollars are somehow going to send our kids to Harvard, when that's not really the case. Would you oppose further cuts to inflation-adjusted higher education funding? Would you oppose further cuts to inflation-adjusted higher education funding? I'm actually going to skip that question. I have no idea what that actually means. Would you support efforts to raise the wages of university support staff to the same level as those in state government? Our government in Illinois is already too large. We should start to modernize the government in Illinois. Do we need to have brick and mortar institutions? Can we use technology to innovate and bring down costs, hence cost to taxpayers, who are already some of the most overburdened taxpayers in the country? So see, once you start to look at these questions, you start to see that these groups, like AFSCME, really are advocating for their members, and they're not advocating for taxpayers or the citizens of the state. Would you support measures to establish more equitable pension systems by improving Tier 2 benefits to ensure they allow for secure retirement for dedicated public servants? And then also, would you oppose an amendment to the Illinois Constitution repealing the safeguards it provides for public employee retirement benefits? Okay, so let's address this, because this is the issue that's impacting our state. And it all started from Governor Edgar ramping up the cost of living adjustments, the COLAs in the pensions. And then with the Workers' Rights Amendment, which was cemented into the Illinois State Constitution, is going to make pension reform a lot harder in the state. Pension reform is not sexy, but it's necessary. And it's necessary on a few fronts. First, we need pension reform. In this state to make sure that the retirements of current state employees are protected. We have to make sure. I mean, I feel the same way about my 401k. I want to make sure that I have money to retire on one day. And so when people say pensions are a promise, yes, they are. They're a promise for as much as we can afford to pay the promises, because when the money runs out, there's not enough promises that are going to help us pay for those retirements of those employees. So the fix the pension issue is very simple in this state. One, anybody who's currently collecting a pension, we stop those state pensions right there on that day. Everything that's accrued, they continue to have it, they continue to own it. Any dollar invested after that day goes into a 401k style plan. So when those public workers retire, they'll collect from their pension and their 401k. Two, pay 50% of their healthcare costs after retirement. Currently, they don't pay any. And three, eliminate the cost of living adjustment, which doubles pensions after 20 years. It just keeps bundling up. It's not sustainable. And I'm open to addressing any of those things and talking about them in a public forum, in a manner with fellow lawmakers to try to fix this issue. Because if we don't, people will lose their retirements. And I don't want that. I don't think any sane person wants that. So that probably is going to answer any pension question in here. Would you support legislation that would permit the state labor boards to order meaningful remedies, such as interest arbitration, when a public employer bargains, quote, in bad faith, end quote, or commits other serious unfair labor practices? Honestly, I don't know. I'd have to look further into that. It's a very complicated question. I'm not well versed in labor law, so I got to think about that. Sometimes, I don't have the answer to every question, but it's something that I would study and get to know more about. Would you support legislation to ensure base wages for direct support employees serving individuals with developmental disabilities in community settings are at least 150% of minimum wage? Look, I think that these are things that should be negotiated with local governments. And I don't think a top-down state solution solves that. There's quite a few questions on private equity. Would you support updating our state's laws to ensure that private equity firms seeking to form or acquire disability service agencies must provide disclosures necessary to give lawmakers, workers, advocates a complete understanding of relationships between investors, managers, and assets? Look, you know what? Let's see what the other questions are first, actually. Would you support laws designed to restrict consultant management fees? And okay, would you support strengthening regulations so that the common issue at private equity owned agencies are identified, tracked, and corrected? Look, I just think anybody doing business with the state should be open and transparent. I also think that about public sector unions, that they should be open and they should be transparent and available for public scrutiny by elected officials as well. I think that goes both ways. I guess I'm equal opportunity on that one. Would you oppose service cutbacks and layoffs of frontline state employees? Would you oppose service cutbacks or layoffs of frontline state employees? I mean, it's a bland question, and I have no idea in what kind of context. Not comfortable giving you an answer on that. Would you support innovative measures intended to improve recruitment and hiring in state government? Yes, 100%. Innovative measures intended to improve recruitment and hiring in state government. I mean, there are so many things that we can do in this state. You can look at the private sector for what they're doing with their hiring practices. You can start to integrate technologies. You could even look at virtual workplaces. There are so many cool things we could do that I think we could improve that. So yes. Would you support efforts to streamline the state's hiring process? Yes. Less bureaucracy. Would you support efforts to restore the share of state income tax revenues that local governments historically receive through the local government distributive fund? I don't know what that fund is. I think if any of my opponents told you they knew exactly what that fund is, they might be lying to you. Something that I have to look at. Would you oppose cuts in state grants to help sustain important local government functions such as public health and probation services? I guess it would depend. I mean, I feel like every local government is different. I've seen it. I've gone over local government budgets. So I guess it depends. Would you oppose a state-imposed property tax freeze? Nope. I don't even have to read the rest of the question. I would not oppose a property tax freeze. Matter of fact, it's what we need in this state. We pay the highest property taxes in the state by burden. And the fact is, I can't afford to buy a home here in the state. I can't really even afford rent here in this state. And both those things are tied into property taxes. Every time local government increases their property tax levy, it has a direct correlation on rent and mortgages for people. And you wonder why they move out of state. They move out of state, they go down to Tennessee, they go to Wisconsin, and guess what? They still have fire departments, police departments, bridges, roads, townships, whatever. They offer these services in those states at a substantially lower cost. I am not, period, ever, period, going, period, to, period, say, period, no, period, to, period, a, period, property, period, tax, period, levy, period, freeze, period. That's going to get cut. I would never say no to a property tax freeze ever, period, full stop. Would you support legislation that would allow home rule municipalities to modernize their revenue system by enacting sales tax on services or other revenue measures? Look, I support giving home rule and even local governments more autonomy because, quite frankly, it's the government closest to the people. And I also think that local government, we need to see an increase in participation in voting in those elections when only 10 to 12% of the people show up and they vote for these people who are responsible for 70% of your property tax bill, or even 80%. I think that's ludicrous. So, would you support an increase in headcount at DCFS to aid in critical family interventions and reduce caseloads? I mean, it's a state agency. I think you need to look at state agencies on a case-by-case basis. I could tell you my baseline knowledge of DCFS is that there need to be some committee hearings on some of the issues going on there. I think taxpayers and I think people deserve those hearings and they deserve answers from the state bureaucrats. Would you support taking steps to reverse privatization of services, such as intact and foster casework, which are effectively provided directly by DCFS? I don't think you ever take privatization off the table. I mean, if that makes me sound like an extremist, if that makes me sound like some radical person, I think it's prudent. And I would venture to guess the vast majority of Illinoisans, whether you're a Democrat or a Republican or an independent, or like a lot of people my age, people who just don't vote, I think if I made that argument to them, they would agree with that. Would you support measures to increase the safety of and reduce the risk of DCFS field staff for what they face on the job? Look, yeah, we should protect state workers. I think any business in the private sector does the same. They try to protect their workers. And I think taxpayers want to see their state workers protected. And how we do that, I think that's the debate. But yes. Would you support efforts to ensure DOC and DJJ facilities are in good repair in order to provide safe environment for both staff and incarcerated individuals? Yes. I mean, a lot of these are yes, I don't have to grandstand on them, or they're going to be no, and I don't have to grandstand. I think for prudency's sake, I'm already about 21 minutes in, still got some others to go, so I'm going to try to be a little bit more brief with them. Would you support efforts to reduce excessive amounts of mandatory overtime in these agencies by improving recruitment and hiring? Yes, I just got to be more efficient, think differently, be 21st century minded. Would you support efforts to reduce the incident of assaults on IDOC staff? I think it's a good goal. I don't support assault on state workers, and I think we should look at how we go ahead and reduce those incidents. But how, right? I mean, that's kind of the practicality of the whole thing. Would you support efforts to ensure the timely implementation of capital projects to address physical deterioration of DOC facilities? Yeah, I mean, you want to make sure if you're paying contractors or you're paying people to build things that it's timely, but it's also safe and done correctly. Would you support moving the IDOC memorial wall to the State House grounds so it rests beside the firefighters, police, nurses, miners, and other memorials? Yes, I do. I think there's a way we could get around using taxpayer dollars for it. I think there's quite a few private donors who would be able to assist with that. And I think they'd be willing to, and I think it'd be a patriotic duty that these people might feel to do that. So yeah, I think that's a great idea from AFSCME. Would you oppose privatization of any state service that results in reductions of workers' wages and benefits? No, I don't support opposing privatization or taking it off the table entirely. I think that's extreme. Would you oppose any change in state law that makes it easier to privatize public services? No, I wouldn't oppose that. Would you support a full spectrum of services for people with developmental disabilities, including access to SODCs for those who want and that need that level of care? Well, I think if we offer any state service, we should try to meet the needs of the people using the state service to the best of our ability. You know, I mean, we're not going to be able to give away millions and millions of dollars to people. But I think yes, we do. Would you support a transparent process for documenting outcomes of residents who transition out of SODCs? And by the way, for those of you who don't know, SODCs are state-operated developmental centers. They serve individuals with developmental disabilities, including complex medical conditions and behavior disorders. Would I support a transparent process for documenting outcomes? Sure. I mean, we provided the state service. I think we should have a transparent process. Would you oppose the closure of any of the state's 6 remaining developmental centers? Well, see, that's a complex question because, if I were to say yes, then, oh my gosh, you're taking away services from people. But if I say no, then you're also saying that you don't want to try to maybe create efficiencies or think outside the box. I think there might be gray area in there from maybe it could include closures, but it could also include finding modern ways to start to address and help the people, some of the most vulnerable in our state who need the help. And it could be cost efficient, 21st century, provide the services that they need. So it's something that I would definitely be interested in discussing and debating, more importantly enough. IDHS, this one's a long one. You know what? I am just going to put it right there. Yeah, I guess I would support a legislative review. I mean, it never hurts to exercise your power as a lawmaker. Would you oppose the closure of state hospitals serving individuals with severe mental illnesses? I would go back and just say that I can't say yes or no, but I think that we can still look at modern ways to address the needs and maybe come up with 21st century methods to make sure these individuals get the help that they need. Would you support funding to maintain enough forensic beds in state mental systems so that persons with mental illnesses who commit crimes are not forced to remain in county jails? Sure, yes. I mean, it's supporting funding, but if we don't want to increase taxes, then it's how do you move the money around to make it happen? And I think that's a good discussion. Would you support staffing levels that are sufficient for ensuring employees and patient safety? Again, we want to make sure that our employees are safe, like any other business. We don't want employees not being safe, but we also don't need to be extreme about it, right? Would you support legislation that would enhance the financial stability of these county-owned nursing homes for future generations? I mean, I would let the market decide, and I think they would probably need to be evaluated, right? I mean, if we're doing state reviews, that should be part of a state review process. Be open, transparent, decide what we need, what we don't need, if needs are being met for people, and just kind of go from there. Would you support legislation requiring a citizen referendum before the sale or closure of a county-owned nursing home? I think that's up to the counties to decide, but I think it should be a very easy process to put it on the ballot. If that's what the elected officials of that county want. Would you stand up to Big Pharma and support state-level action to rein in the cost of prescription drugs? So this is a very interesting topic, and it's something that I've kind of come around on just in the recent years, because, I guess if you would ask me this question 10 years ago, I'd say, well, let the free market decide what the price of drugs would be here in this country. But I think on a state level, we could take actions to take it to Big Pharma a little bit. And I think the vast majority of Americans want that. Big Pharma sometimes doesn't always have the best interest of the people in mind. Sometimes it comes down to the shareholders or the investors. And they're not like a traditional business model. So maybe that's something that we could look at, and I'd be interested in talking with Democratic colleagues about. It could be a bipartisan way of making sure we put Illinoisans first. Almost done with AFSCME. Almost done. Would you support legislation to restore unemployment insurance eligibility for non-instructional educational employees during summer months and academic breaks? No. Would you be willing to show support for workers who are struggling to form a union or achieve a fair contract? No. Have you been endorsed by any unions, elected officials, or political organizations? If yes, list them. No, I haven't been endorsed by any unions. Elected officials in the past and political organizations have endorsed me. It's numerous. I don't have them all off the top of my head. So I'm going to have to skip that, or maybe list them here. How much do you think you will need for your campaign budget? I'm not sharing that with you. Sorry, AFSCME. That one you don't get. Onward to Illinois Federation of Teachers. I think this is a good next step because I did serve as a U46 school board member. Education's a hot button issue for me. Teachers unions in the past and I have not had a great working relationship with each other. Which is okay because they are fighting for their members and I was fighting for taxpayers. Oh, this one is I will say, give the teachers union a lot more credit that this seems to be a little bit shorter, a little bit more brief, probably, hopefully maybe a little less, nope, still grandstanding with talking points, but nonetheless, it's their sales pitch to us candidates, asking for my contact information. It's all publicly available. I don't think I'll be getting a check from the Teachers Union. I don't think actually anybody will be getting a check from the Teachers Union. Maybe Jessica Brueggelmann's. Don't know. Oh, these are just yes or no questions. I don't need to grandstand. Will you oppose legislation that limits or eliminates the right of educators and public employees to strike? No, I'm not going to oppose that legislation. Would you support legislation to ban any money provided through state contracts from being used on, quote, anti-union, end quote, activities? No. I wouldn't ban that. This is a very... They believe in that collective bargaining process is the best way to guarantee teachers have a meaningful role in developing and implementing strategies to help all students reach high academic standards. Do I agree that collective bargaining does that? No. And I would say, look at state test scores across this entire state. Chicago Public Schools, Elgin, Geneva, Algonquin, District 300, all these school districts, 301, all have collective bargaining. And their students can't read or do math at grade level. No, I don't agree with the premise of that. And a matter of fact, that kind of angers me a little bit. And I think it angers most people who just want a good education for their children. Will you support changes to tax policy that alleviate Illinois' long-term structural deficit while providing targeted tax relief to low and moderate income families? So, will you support changes to tax policy that alleviate Illinois' long-term structural deficit? Yes. While providing targeted tax relief to low and moderate income families? Yes, but I think we have a different definition of what those terms are. I'm willing to bet that. Would you support legislation to require more accurate TIF surplus calculation and allow surplus TIF funds to be directed towards public school operations? TIFs are some of the most overused kind of taxing districts by municipalities. It's very complex, not going to get into it. A TIF is supposed to essentially be a district around a blighted area. And all the money collected in that area is supposed to go to economic redevelopment in the area. And for a long time, municipalities have gotten away with putting TIF districts over areas that are not blighted, but have gotten people to justify the term blighted and then using it for special little projects and things. Like downtown St. Charles would not be blighted. But I believe at one time there was, or there still is, a TIF district. Just saying, it's overused. I don't actually agree with the use of TIF districts. Just gonna say that. And that's not gonna answer their question, but after 30 minutes of answering union questions, I'm getting a little antsy. Would you oppose legislation that would put a constitutional amendment on the ballot to weaken the pension protection clause? No, I would not oppose that. But just because I don't oppose it doesn't mean I want to take pensions away. We need to fix pensions in this state, or else these members are going to lose their retirements because the math will catch up. There are math teachers out there, and the math teachers are watching. And they know eventually when the math catches up and the taxpayers can't foot the bill, you're going to have a lot of angry public sector workers out there. And I want to prevent that. I want to help save your retirement. There's a way we can do it without taking pensions away. We just have to have the conversation. Each year, will you support making the full pension payments as certified by the state's pension system regardless of other budget pressures? See, now because we can't have the pension talk in this state, then you start to have, well, you got to either do this or you got to do this. I support making sure that we fund our state obligations. I can't actually answer that question. And I'm not going to answer that question. This one's actually, they are a lot more clever with leading candidates down this path. And then ultimately it's black or white, and that's probably why they do these yes or no questions. Do you believe that the future retirement benefits for current employees cannot be reduced? Benefits, right? So like the money that they paid in, they should receive back. And you know what? I'm even cool making sure that we have increases. We don't need a cost of living increase every year, right? But the benefits, like we can reduce, like asking them to pay 50% of their healthcare cost. I think that's prudent. I think that's reasonable. And that's reducing because it's asking them to pay something. But that we should be able to ask that question and save their retirement so they can spend it, I don't know, sipping Mai Tais on a beach in South Beach, Like, we can do that. We can have both. Taxpayers can win. Our public servants can win. Let's just have the conversation. Like a serious conversation. I'm all fired up now. This one's got me fired up. I thought AFSCME would do it, but the Federation of Teachers are sure doing it. Will you oppose efforts to convert Illinois' pension system from a defined benefit plan to a defined contribution plan or 401k style plan coordinated with Social Security? So they already have in mind what people have been pushing, and I'm sure the Republican Party in the state's been pushing something. I support WirePoint's plan. It's a plan that I'm very well versed in, considering I used to work at WirePoint, and Ted Dabrowski and Mark Kalinin and John Klingner. They're very knowledgeable, and they understand the intricacies of the pension system and pension law and pension policy. But we do have certain workers in the state. I believe they're as an option for community college professors. I think they can actually choose a 401k style plan. So moving from, and not changing, keeping the current pension plan and stopping it on one day, so everything that they've earned is collected and it's here, and they're gonna receive it. But in the future, moving any future dollars that they are putting towards their retirement into a 401k style plan, asking them to pay 50% of their healthcare costs, and eliminating the COLA fixes the pension issue, saves retirements for public sector workers. We can do that. Would you insist that representatives of the IFT be at your table when lawmakers are negotiating any pension issue? They're not going to like that answer. It's no. Would you oppose shifting the cost of public employee pensions to local school districts, essentially raising property taxes on local taxpayers? They lead you down the road again. No, I don't want to shift the costs of pensions back on school districts. We can fix it on a state level. Let's be adults. Let's get in a room. You don't have to fully adopt. I'm not asking you to fully adopt the WirePoint's plan, even though that would fix the issue. But let's start there and let's figure something out. Let's just do it. Let's save workers' retirements and taxpayers. We can do it. Would you support legislation that addresses Tier 2 inadequacies and provides benefits that help public employers attract and retain employees? No, because I support legislation to fix the system. Let's just do it. Do you believe charter school operators and individual charter schools should be open and transparent in process, budgeting, salaries, and contracts with private vendors? Look, I believe in charter schools. Give them the autonomy. Let them do stuff. I voted for a charter school. I got a charter school in U46. We disagree on the use of charter schools, but it's helping children. Will you oppose third-party contracting of school services? No. Will you oppose any legislation that provides public dollars to private schools through vouchers? No. Do you believe the Illinois Constitution prohibits private school vouchers? No. Do you support effort to reduce the amount of testing in Illinois schools? Yes, because these tests sometimes are not the best ways to measure a student's academic achievement, but it's the only way we have right now. It's the only way. Let's try to figure something out. But yes. Would you support legislation prohibiting state standardized testing beyond which is required by the federal government? The federal Department of Education should not exist. The state should be responsible for setting education policy, educational requirements. I think the state of Illinois has that right. We as the people of Illinois, Illinoisans, should be empowered through our lawmakers to set educational standards. And that's what we should be doing. I'm a product of my local schools. So I guess if you want more Cody Holtz, we should continue to keep public schools open. Maybe that'll change the Illinois Federation of Teachers' opinions on the use of private school vouchers and charter schools. Or maybe not. Do you support the continued right of local unions to bargain the length of the school? No, sorry, I don't. Actually, and I'm not sorry either. No, I just don't. Would you support legislative efforts to address the underlying cause of the teacher shortage, including issues related to recruitment and retention? Same thing as I talked about with AFSCME. Modernize the hiring process. Let's start to think about education in a different way. Do we really have a shortage? I don't know. I don't buy it. Our teachers are some of the most well-paid teachers in the country, especially in the suburban area and in Chicago. And they're paid more than teachers in other states who provide better results to taxpayers. And that's not an attack on teachers. That's an attack on the unions who are negotiating salaries and essentially holding taxpayers hostage. That, I know, is not popular to say with the AFT or the IFT. AFT would be American Federation. Recognizing the fiscal damage done to public higher education and enormous debt middle-class families incur when sending their children to college, would you support increased funding for public higher education? That should be left up to local taxpayers and their community college districts to decide. Do you support increased funding for the monetary award program that helps the neediest students go to college? I think we got to get our fiscal house in order before increasing funding for really anything. Do you support legislation to create a democratically elected board of trustees for the city colleges of Chicago? Okay, this is a huge question. Normally I would say yes, right? Like they should have that ability. But in this state, we have over 850 school districts. In Florida, I think they only have like 60, 65. There'll be a fact check here with how many schools. And they have 6 million more people. We do not need more government in this state. We don't need to have more taxing bodies. So, no, I don't think we should. Not at this time. Will you oppose privatization of state government services? Nope. Would you prioritize filling state positions that produce more revenue than costs and dedicate that surplus funding to filling vacancies? So yes to the first part, and then no, providing tax relief is the ultimate goal. And then candidate background, which is all publicly available. All right, 50 minutes in. This is amazing. This is good. Got one more. This is the AFL-CIO. If I run out of battery life here, I am gonna open it and do it in front of the AFL-CIO when I'm down in Springfield on Tuesday. So they give another nice welcome. Here's who we are. Here's who we represent email. Then they ask for all the contact information. And this one, $74 questions. 74 questions. I am flabbergasted, actually. And they're just yes or no questions. Part of me kind of wants to just do a speed round here. I'm going to read it in my head. Or maybe see if there's any questions in here kind of not around what we talked about already. Would you support or oppose legislation further restricting the amount of source of money unions can spend on political campaigns or legislative activities? I would support restricting more money being spent by labor unions in this state towards political campaigns or legislative activities. Do you support or oppose legislation that bars companies from doing business with state government if the company has permanently replaced legally striking workers? I would oppose that legislation that bars companies that decide to hire who they want. Would you be willing to provide public support for union labor action by speaking at a rally? Not your guy, sorry. Asking an employer to remain neutral in organizing campaign? Not your guy, sorry. Holding a hearing to draw attention to employer abuses of workers' rights? Sending a letter to employees in support of organizing a union? Nope. No on all of them. Then a whole section on workers' compensation. I am not well versed in workers' compensation law. And they're all very long questions. So I'm going to skip that section. Unemployment insurance, very long. Labor standards. Do you support the ability for gig workers to collectively bargain or organize? Uber drivers, Lyft, those people. I oppose that. They all sign a contract when they get employed. Will you support legislation that expands coverage of the Prevailing Wage Act to other construction projects that use public funds, such as TIF districts and enterprise zones? Every year I was able to vote against it as a school board member. I voted against the Prevailing Wage Act. Symbolic, because either way, the school district would have had to adopt the prevailing wage standards. Prevailing wage is essentially union wage. And it's a bad thing for the school district, and it has to do with any type of service provided, like lawn mowing, pipe fitting, all these other different construction jobs and things like that need to get done. The school district has to pay a prevailing wage, which is usually in line with union wages. The issue, though, is it halts smaller contractors from being able to acquire government work. Historically, it's actually been bad for black and brown contractors that these laws were enacted after the Civil War to prevent black workers from coming up into urban areas and taking jobs away. So I don't support the Prevailing Wage Act. I think it's something that's a very bad thing for taxpayers and for business growth. We should encourage the little guy to start a business, just an individual, and grow it and be able to bid competitively on government projects. So let's see. Oh, this one's interesting. Okay, this is kind of a cool one. Do you support or oppose allowing employers to eavesdrop on their employees' workplace telephone conversations and electronic mail, or to monitor their after-work activities? There's a few things, right? Anything done on the job, the employer has the right to monitor. But that ends the moment they leave work. I don't care what these employees do, if they're state contractors, state workers, whatever. Once they leave, we, the employers of those people, are not responsible for their after-work activities. It's kind of creepy. It's Big Brother-esque. I agree with that. I agree 100% with that. And if there's any state workers that are being monitored or contractors that are being monitored after work while they're off the clock by state bureaucrats, there should be legislative hearings on that. That's interesting. So AFL-CIO, even though we don't agree on many things, if I happen to make it down there and something like this happens, I'm happy to look into that, because that's just weird. Oh, we're only in 40. You guys got to work on how long this is. I mean, look at these questions, actually. Right? So that's why I'm not reading them, because this is almost like reading a book to you. And a lot of this we've already gone over, like, do you support or oppose privatization of government services? Would you work to ensure that developers meet with appropriate unions regarding post-construction employment? We talk school vouchers. Yeah, so the AFL-CIO kind of got the short stick on this one, because I'm not going to be answering all their questions. Even though I'm sure representatives from the AFL-CIO will be able to watch this video and kind of ascertain where I might be on some of those questions. Yeah, then we talk pensions. So we're up on like an hour. Maybe I'll fill this out and scan it in and just post the answers. But the issue that you guys have seen so far with this and me answering these questions are, a lot of them are just kind of, they're very slanted, and then you could only answer them one way, or else they're like gotcha questions, right? Or she means something totally different. So with a lot of these questions, it requires a little bit more talking. And I think if candidates followed this route, where they created videos and they were able to have this type of discussion, if they did this, it just might be easier for people to have political dialogue with each other. And really, it makes it less easy for these groups to go out and tell people, oh, Cody supports taking away, our pensions and blah, 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 which is not true. Because I want every state worker who has paid into their system, paid into their pensions, their retirement, to get their retirement. We all deserve a comfortable retirement. But it also depends on how we save for it. And the fact that these are public funds, we have to make sure that it's there, that it's protected, that when they retire, it's not going to run out because somebody's robbing a pension fund to pay for something else. It's a very real issue. And I don't think there's really anybody out there, at least who's right in the mind, who would be like, we should do this. So, anyways, like I said, coming up on an hour, Cody Holt for State Senate in the 33rd District. This is how I might actually start answering questions. I'm going to definitely chop this video a little bit. But yeah, it was a good use of time, and I think I received a questionnaire from the Illinois Right to Life. That'll be coming up shortly. And yeah, I call on all of my opponents in the race to make their answers to these questions public. And they don't have to actually sit and go through the AFL-CIO one. But if they do, I'd be very impressed, and I might make a follow-up video as well. But once you get to that third one, you basically answered all the questions anyways. So, All right, guys, just onward. It's gonna be a busy week, so very excited to see what we have going on, and we're gonna keep up the fight and the fight for you.